Hey everybody, welcome back. It's MJ here, Just Plain Fun. And if you follow me on Facebook, you already knew this video was coming. It's going to be all about Rabbet planes, also known as rebate planes, also known as Phillisters or Phillisters, or however you pronounce that particular word. As I was researching and getting stuff together to put this video together, I quickly realized that I'm not going to be able to cover everything in just one video. So I'm going to spread this out to a minimum of 2, if not 3 videos. And that way I'm not making a 30 or 40 minute long video that, quite frankly, nobody's going to sit all the way through. And so with that in mind, let's go ahead and hop in. One of the questions that came up was somebody asking about the difference between Rabbet, Rebate, and then the Fillister. And I know, the Duplex plane or Duplex moniker will come up as well. So Duplex, quite simple, just means that there are 2, just like a duplex home. So you've got 2 places that you can install the blade. You can put it back here for a regular Rabbet or Rebate. You can put it up here for bullnose work, so you can get all the way up into a tight corner and then finish out that section there with a chisel. And that's a duplex or 2, as opposed to a single, like this style of Rabbet plane, where it's just the single there. It doesn't have the forward option for installing the blade. And then as far as Rebate versus Rabbet, if you follow James Wright, you've probably already seen this or know this, and he talks about basically if it's Rabbet, that's here in the US, that's going to be American, the American term and how we pronounce it. And if you go Rebate, then that just means that you're on the other side of the pond and you're making a rebate. And my understanding from my research is that it's actually derives from French, where they still to this day call it raboting, or however they pronounce it. Maybe somebody can help me out with that. And then as far as rabbiting or rebate versus Phillister, I mean, let's go with Phillister. All that is, as far as I can tell, is just whether it has a fence or not. And so this is going to be a Rabbet or Rebate plane. And then as soon as we put the fence on it, in this case, a moving fence. So it's a moving Phillister plane. And that is, from what I'm understanding, the only difference. And if you have evidence of otherwise, feel free to hop on YouTube or hop on Facebook and, present your source, and we'll definitely take that into account. So aside from the terminology that we just covered, the main thing that I want to talk about in this particular video is I kind of want to make this a buyer's guide to help you all along, especially if you have not invested in a Rabbet plane yet, you're thinking about it, or maybe you have a partial Rabbet plane that you picked up and you're looking for parts and trying to get the best price. Whatever it might be, this is kind of a buyer's guide to help steer you along. So if you're looking for a Rabbet plane to use and you want to get the best bang for your buck, then what I recommend is to pick up an off-brand. Pick up a Sargent, a Craftsman, even a Miller's Falls, one that's not Stanley, and you're going to get the best bang for your buck. There's virtually no difference in the actual use or employment of this plane. And so to get the most for your money, you want to go with an off-brand. This one happens to be a Craftsman. It was made by either Stanley or Sargent. I think it was made by Stanley. And same thing with Ward's Master, which you'll see. Same thing, as a matter of fact, even with some Union planes. This is a Union that was either made in conjunction with or made by Stanley. And of course, the front of it's broken off. But the best bang for your buck, and if you're not concerned about having the brand name, get an off-brand, and specifically get one that has this blade adjustment that was introduced in 1925, because that will make your life easier. You just loosen up this screw right here. You can adjust the blade and then tighten that back down a little bit, and you'll be all set. And just as a side note, this is another Craftsman, and this one was actually made by Sargent. And the telltale sign is this handhold, thumb hold, if you will, up front. That's the main sign. And I'll talk about another major difference here in just a little bit. But this one's a Craftsman made by Sargent, and another one that's going to be a good value for you. And the other thing that I want you to really think about before you buy a Rabbet plane is try to buy one that's already complete, because you are going to spend oftentimes more than what the plane is worth buying specifically the fence and the fence rod, which has typically been removed and lost. and or the depth stop and the depth stop screw. So this is a collectible, at least what I consider a collectible Stanley right here. And this is the one from my personal collection. It is complete. I know I don't have the depth stop installed, but with the depth stop and the original screw. So if you can find it, and price wise, from what I've seen, especially lately, and I'm putting this down in December of 2021, is you're looking at somewhere between $65 and $85 is pretty typical for one that is complete. If you're getting one that's in really pristine condition, blade already sharpened, and or that has the original box, you know, you could pay as much as $120. But average speaking, you're looking at anywhere from $65 to about $85 for a complete one. For your off brands, again, complete, you could pay anywhere from $45 up to $75, maybe even higher, for say a Craftsman, a Sargent, a Miller's Falls, etc., a Ward's Master. They're going to be less. They don't have the collectability of a Stanley. I think I paid somewhere around, with shipping, I think it was under $30 for this one, but it was missing a screw, which for the depth stop, which I happen to have on hand. And so I was able to put this one together for a good price. But the main thing is, when you're out in the wild and you come across basically a half of a rebate plane or less, do not buy this plane. You know, do not waste your money on this. I mean, even if, especially this one with no blade and no lever cap, I mean, I wouldn't give $2 for this. And if you happen to be in the market for one of these, I have plenty of bodies I will sell you for cheap if you happen to want one. But my best advice to you is, don't waste your money on a half a Rabbet plane. If you can pick one up, you know, that has at least the fence, or at least the depth stop, at least has one or the other, you know, come in around $20 to $30 if you can. Because this fence right here, whether you buy it from me or if you buy it on eBay, you're going to pay anywhere from $20 to, especially with the rod, you're going to pay anywhere between $20 and $30 if you're trying to get both components there, or all three if you include the screw, which is sometimes sold separately. So don't overspend on that for sure. And then the really obnoxious part is, this original screw to hold the depth stop on is going to run you anywhere from $18 to $26 for just that screw. And then your depth stop is going to run you, same thing, anywhere from $18 to as much as $26 if you were buying it by itself, say on eBay, for example. So you really got to watch out for that. And that, if you don't remember anything else from this entire video, just remember, if you want to get the best bang for your buck, buy a complete Rabbet plane. You know, hold out for one, buy a complete one, or make sure that you don't overpay for a partial one. And based off of those prices that I just listed you, that should be a guide to help you not overspend. If you do happen to be out in the wild and you just fall in love with a partial Rabbet plane and you just can't help yourself, or maybe you've already purchased one, but let's go with the first scenario. You're out there, you find one, you can't turn away. The price you feel like is too good and you can't walk away. Here are some things that you need to look out for. It's not uncommon for these to be broken, and you want to look for that. You know, look for that braze on them, just like you would on a bench plane. Another thing, look at the spur and screw, because sometimes that screw will be rusted in place, or it'll be jacked up, and once again, you're going to be paying money to replace the spur and or screw for that, you know, and shipping and everything. As far as the lever caps go, you know, you're looking at around like $8 to $12, depending on condition and type on that. The iron, same thing, about $8 to $12 usually. This individual screw that goes right here, that holds the lever cap and the blade together and in place, that one's going to run you around, you know, about $8 usually, or less, depending on how much you're buying. Which, incidentally, that is the same screw as what is on a 140, in case you didn't see that in one of my other videos. But the main thing that you want to look for is, people have gotten frustrated with these bodies and not being able to find or use the original screw, and so they bore it out right here, and then they'll rethread it. And it may or may not have the screw that they replaced it with. And so you might spend, you know, $20 on a body like this, maybe it has the blade and the lever cap and everything, and then you get it home and maybe you buy a screw, and then you're looking at that. And this is not a one-time deal where I just happen to run into that. I've seen this more than once. And as a matter of fact, here's another example right here where same thing. So this is not a one-time thing. It happens. And another thing you want to look out for is look at those threads inside there, because that fence, just in case you didn't know, can be attached on either side of the plane. And another thing that's not uncommon is to get those threads jacked at to where you can't actually install a fence, or at a minimum, you're going to have to clean it up and possibly even chase those threads in order to be able to use it. So those are all things that you want to look out for when you're considering buying a partial Rabbet plane. Now, let's say that you've already spent the money, you already have a partial Rabbet plane at home, and you've been looking for a fence, or you've been looking for a fence rod or a depth stop or whatever part you're looking for, or you find that sweet deal and you do pick one up for $15, and now you're ready to spend another $40 or $50 if that's what you have to do in order to make your plane complete. Y'all know I'm a parts guy. Maybe that's why you're watching this video. Now we need to talk about compatibility stuff. And I know somebody asked me specifically, it was Jimmy Harris asked specifically about what's compatible with what. And this is pretty important here. So the first thing we want to talk about is depth stops. And so if you're looking at a Stanley depth stop, note where the V-groove is that corresponds with that ridge on the back of the depth stop. So this is a Stanley. This is a Sargent built Craftsman right here. Notice where the V-groove is in relation to the hole. And I know it's confusing, or can be confusing because that line, the rust, but basically the V-groove on the Sargent, or the Craftsman in this case, is going to be behind the hole there for the screw. And that means that these two depth stops are not going to be compatible with each other. And that is the first thing that you want to pay attention to. And Sargent was kind enough to actually put their number 79 on the back, because it is a number 79 Rabbet plane. And that's usually a good telltale sign to keep you, keep you from buying the wrong one. That's something that you'll want to watch out for. I do have plenty, as of the filming of this, I have plenty of this style in stock. So if you need one of those, by all means, let me know. And they are cheaper than the Stanleys, because obviously supply and demand, there's not as much demand for those. Along those same lines, the fences themselves with Stanley, if you have an older one, if you have a really old one, it might have a B casting. These came out in 1884 for the first time. So it might have a B casting on it. And I do have some of those that I'll show in the second version when I talk more about types. This is kind of I guess kind of a mid-range. It doesn't have the hole right there. This was added later, and I don't know if that's like a beef up thing or if it's an auxiliary hole so that you can add an auxiliary fence of some kind. But that's a later one. And then just like on the depth stop, you do have the 79 the Sargent went ahead and put on those. So that's a good indicator. And the style of these thumb screws is going to be different as well. So on your Stanleys, especially your older ones and even your mid-range ones, are going to have this style of thumb screw. And it's not uncommon for that to have been replaced with one of these. This is a later, an aftermarket, not really an aftermarket, but it's a later Stanley. And on the really, really new ones, this is the style that Stanley has gone to. So the threading is the same. And speaking of which, this is actually a made in England. This is a much later one. And this threading right here is actually different. I get that question quite often, are the made in England parts compatible with the older Stanleys? And the answer to that a lot of times is no. So for example, this fence right here is actually too fat. It's too beefed up, and it won't actually go underneath the body on that one. So with the fences, that's something to keep in mind. If you're trying to keep it period correct or vintage correct for your plane, just like I've asked this question, 1,000 times, shoot me a picture of your plane and then I'll do my best. And between the two of us, I'm sure with a little research, we can figure out which part is, belongs on your particular plane. So we talked about the depth stops and the compatibility there. Remember at the beginning, I said I wasn't 100% sure. I think this was made by Stanley. And part of the reason why I say that is because this one's got the V groove forward of the screw hole. Now it does have a different style and a different thread pitch for the set screw than what you'll see on a Stanley. And that is one of the hardest things to do, is to match the correct thread pitch, because there are at least 3 that I know of. And that's whether you're talking about the fence rod, you're talking about the depth stop screw, or if you're talking about the, you know, even these screws right here, they all have different thread pitches, which is kind of a pain and something that you need to keep in mind. And yet another thing that's really important is, if you look at that screw right there that holds the lever cap and the blade in place, see the diameter of that? And then check out this Craftsman, aka whether it's Sargent or Stanley. Something you just need to keep in mind, or keep an eye out for, especially if you're going to replace the cap on that. And you can see this is going to be the one for the thicker or the fatter screw. This is going to be the one for the thinner one. You have to make sure that you get the right one. And like I said, this threading right here, the thread pitch on this set screw is going to be different. And so it's not always going to thread in. See, it just goes in a little bit and it won't turn. So that's another thing too, is you got to make sure that you're getting the correct thread pitch there as well. And while we're talking about this, let me just go ahead and go over this. This screw right here is fairly universal. It's the same one. If it's a Stanley, it's the same one that's going to be on your scrub planes and your 40 and a half. It's going to be on your Liberty Bell lever caps. So this particular screw really gets around. It's even going to be on some of your scrapers. So on this particular style, on this number 82 scraper, it's going to be up here. There's another style of scraper, and I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, where the bolt or the screw goes in the bottom. So just something to keep in mind for compatibility purposes, or if you happen to buy a partial scraper or a partial plane, sometimes you can cannibalize parts in order to make something else complete. A couple more things to go over here. The numbering, it's the Stanley number 78. The Miller's Falls, it's a number 86. I'm almost positive. And on the Miller's Falls, it is going to be etched right here, and I'm 99% sure it's Miller's Falls number 86. Y'all call me out if that is incorrect. Whatever one you find, of course, you can just look it up on eBay, and you'll be able to find that equivalent. For the Sargent, it's going to be a number 79. As I talked about, for the Union, it's going to be a Union 43, as you can see right there. So they did each tend to have their own numbers associated with them, but they're all based off of the same general design. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is for this depth stop screw. Remember I said it's going to be anywhere from 18 to 26 bucks depending on where you buy it. I do carry these as an aftermarket replacement, and so that is an option, and they are significantly cheaper. I know some of y'all have actually bought these from me. I buy them in bulk, which means that I can sell them cheaper. You can also buy individual ones on eBay. But if you're buying it from me, especially if you're buying a depth stop with it, or if you're buying other components with it, whether it's for a Rabbet plane or some other plane, then you're going to be able to get this cheaper from me than what you can get it on eBay. Something that I won't cover in this video, and probably not in the other one either, is going to be the actual use or employment of this plane. And the reason why is because there are literally a dozen or more videos on YouTube that you can watch that'll show you how to use this plane. I've watched a handful of them myself, and there's some really good ones out there. So it's not going to do me any good to go over that. So I'm focused more on the parts aspect, of course, because that's what I do, is I try to get parts to y'all, you know, so you can get your plane working again. Something else that's definitely worth covering in this one. I know I've talked in previous videos about the importance of getting yourself a thread pitch gauge. And I can't stress enough, these are super cheap. You can pick them up 10, 15 bucks with shipping included on eBay. And I can't stress enough, get one of these if you're the kind of person that's going to be hunting for tools and hunting for parts, vintage tools. Go ahead and pick one of these up. And remember I said earlier that there are at least three different versions. So there you go. These are all fence rods for Rabbet planes, and those are 3 different thread pitches on that. This one right here is the Stanley, and that one is going to be a 28. The thread pitch on is 28. When you contact me and you want to pick up a part for your Rabbet plane, and sometimes even if it's Stanley, but you know, made in England versus made in the USA, we got to know what that thread pitch is in order for me to make sure that I'm getting you the right part. And I wish I could say that I had some master list somewhere that I could refer to, and that is something that I'm working on, but right now I don't have a complete master list. And that's one of the other reasons why I asked for pictures of your plane, so I can try and match it with one of the ones that I have. But while we're on the subject of thread pitch, these are the depth stop screws, and just for your reference, these are also coming in at, you know, 28 on that. And so you never have to wonder about that again if you've seen this video and you lock that into your brain, and then you'll always know. And you can compliment Stanley on this if you want. This is the fence screw that holds the fence in place, and you can see that one's 28 as well. And if you were in a pinch and you really had to, you could even use this screw for your depth stop. I don't know that you're going to get necessarily the best hold, but if you were in a situation where you wanted to use the depth stop but you didn't necessarily need the fence, for example, maybe you were, you know, clamp some boards down. If you were in a pinch, you could even use that. And I think I might have covered that in my suitable sub video. And for that matter, you could even use this screw right here, which I do sell these. I have a handful of these available. And I know y'all probably get tired of me turning all these into ads, but, you know, as I mentioned also before, I don't make any money off these YouTube videos. So, you know, welcome to my ad platform, I guess. So just another option to think about there and consider. In the next video, I do plan to talk about some of the other Rabbet planes, specifically that Stanley made. So I'll go over the, you know, the 191, 182, excuse me, 192, the 180s, the 190s, that kind of thing. Talk a little bit about the 278, 289. I'm going to go over some of those other Rabbet planes and show you some examples and show you some of those differences. But for the purposes of this video, as I think I mentioned, you know, just focusing on parts procurement and compatibility, and then cost, you know, what you can expect to pay for partials and complete planes. And I think I covered just about everything. If I missed anything, I'll just add it on to the next video. So like always, really appreciate y'all watching. Really appreciate y'all subscribing. I do still owe y'all the giveaway for hitting 1,000 subscribers. It is coming. Just haven't nailed that one down yet because, quite frankly, I've been too busy. But I do appreciate y'all watching, and I look forward to seeing y'all around.